Welcome back to Lesson 4. We began learning to write some consonants last time, but only those with 2 forms. From now on, the letters we'll learn all have 4 forms. In this lesson, we'll learn a group of consonants whose forms are very similar to some vowels that we've learned. Notice that now we have ventured into the territory of 4-form letters, but don't worry. They are very similar to the vowels and E. Feel free to go back to Lesson 2 for a refresher if you have forgotten. You may also notice that the last row, la, this is a special letter, a special form that I will explain later in detail. But first, let's start with ba, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter b. The initial and medial forms are essentially the Arabic letter ya, Cyrillic with 1 dot underneath. The isolated and final forms are a little different. Let's take a look. Pay attention to where the dot is located in different positions. Now, let's practice with some real words.
бота, дыбыс,
Next is the letter pa, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter pe. This is exactly like ba, but with 3 dots instead of 1 dot. The 3 dots are in a triangular formation with 2 above and 1 on the bottom. Let's see how it's written. Now let's practice with real words.
пайыз, ақпан, болып,
There is one more letter that shares the same base form, ta, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter te. This time there are 2 dots and they are on top. Now let's see some real words.
тұр, бітір, зат,
The next one is nun, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter n. Unlike the previous 3 letters which stayed above the bottom line, nun dips below in the isolated and final forms. Let's take a look. Now let's practice with real words.
не, дана, ұн,
The next one is sin, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter S or S. To write this letter, we need to make a shape like a rounded Latin W or Cyrillic sh. Like nun, the isolated and final forms must dip below the bottom line. This letter is also used to write ts, which only appears in foreign words, like Francia. Now let's practice with real words.
Set. Is. Az.
The next one is shin, which is related to sin and corresponds to the Cyrillic letter sha. Add 3 dots above sin in a triangular formation with 1 on top and 2 on the bottom. Note that there are some words written in Cyrillic with the Russian letter sha, such as ash or kish. This is an abbreviation of the underlying morpheme containing 2 shins, 2 shas. So in Arabic, we write 2 shas. Now let's practice with real words.
Şay.
Sh.
Ush.
Next, we have lam, which corresponds to the Cyrillic letter L. It's much taller than the others we've looked at in this lesson, and the final and isolated forms dip below the bottom line. Now let's look at some real words.
Lügat. Bilim. Til.
Finally, we've arrived at the special combination lam alif, which I've mentioned at the beginning of this lesson. It isn't a unique letter, but rather a more aesthetic way of writing with the traditional reed pen. Since this combination ends with alif, its rules regarding connection still apply. Now let's practice with real words.
Lezzet. Ablay. Bala.
Congratulations, you've learned 7 more consonants. I'll see you again in lesson 5.